there's a couple of things I'll share. Mark Newton, who's the head of technical strategy at Fundstrat, has some views on Bitcoin and Ethereum. In the near term, he thinks both have 20% upside from here. But keep in mind, when MicroStrategy began its Bitcoin strategy, Bitcoin was around 16,000. And now MicroStrategy has had a 25 times total return. Part of it is because of the rise in Bitcoin. And part of it, of course, is their ability to be a treasury company.
Mark Newton sees 20% upside for Bitcoin in the short term, but Tom Lee believes it could go even higher. That's the outlook from Fundstrat, where Newton, the head of technical strategy, expects a strong near-term move in both Bitcoin and Ethereum, but Tom Lee, co-founder and head of research, sees a far more explosive setup. He reminds us that when MicroStrategy began its Bitcoin strategy, the asset was trading at just $16.00. Since then, Bitcoin has delivered massive gains and MicroStrategy has posted a 25x return. If you're finding this valuable so far, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe. It really helps the algorithm share this with more people who need to see it. Back to the big picture, according to Lee, the next leg up will be driven by institutional demand, reduced supply, and a structurally different market. For investors still on the sidelines, this could be one of the last windows before Bitcoin breaks into a completely new range. Make sure to stick around until the end of the video as Tom Lee breaks down why Bitcoin's next move could blow past short-term expectations, and how MicroStrategy's success shows the power of long-term conviction.
Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy have created, I think, a really unique company with Bitcoin, because they started by creating a Bitcoin treasury company that has now over 600,000 Bitcoin. I think that they're correct when they say this is, Bitcoin on beta, and that's why it's more attractive than a Bitcoin ETF. What they've done is they've accumulated so much Bitcoin.
What is Bitcoin on beta?
Well, it means that if Bitcoin is at 100,000 and let's say Bitcoin doubles, MicroStrategy should actually rise more than that. And one of the questions people ask is, well, why should MicroStrategy trade at a premium to Bitcoin? And the reason I believe it does is that they own so much Bitcoin, it has a sovereign put. 600,000 Bitcoin is so much that if the US government wants to get to 1 million Bitcoin, they can either buy 1 million Bitcoin in the open market. And I think if sellers knew that, they wouldn't sell and Bitcoin's price would rise parabolically. Or they can pay a premium to buy MicroStrategy and get 600,000 Bitcoin. I think it's not just the US government, it's Qatar, the UAE, or any country that wants to accumulate a large position in Bitcoin. And Ethereum, to me, has a very similar dynamic, because Ethereum benefits from from using smart contracts, but also Ethereum really is benefiting from this state, the ChatGPT moment of stablecoins. Stablecoins have really exploded because consumers, businesses, and banks are really interested in adopting this. The majority of stablecoins are actually transacted on the Ethereum blockchain. And if Treasury Secretary Bessent's right, and it goes from a 250 billion market to 2 trillion, that's exponential demand for Ethereum. So we want to be, an Ethereum treasury company wants to actually accumulate a sizable share of the Ethereum network. And that would actually create, I think, a reflexive benefit, because if you have a large staking entity, you're securing the network. And I think that's the architecture that future banks want to have. When the Goldman and JP Morgans create stable coins, they also want that layer 1 blockchain to be secure.
What is your ETH target short term and long term?
Well, there's a couple of things I'll share. Mark Newton, who's the head of technical strategy at Fundstrat, has some views on Bitcoin and Ethereum. In the near term, he thinks both have 20% upside from here. So that would be putting Ethereum closer to 3,300. And he thinks something around 4,500 or 5,000 in the next few months is achievable. That's a pretty big move for Ethereum. But I think a perspective someone can have is that realize that Circle trades at around 100 times EBITDA, which I think it's fair because it's scarce, and it is one of the best IPOs really in several years. But if you applied that metric to the layer 1 Ethereum, it would imply a value north of ETH per ETH token of over 10,000. So I think it shows you that if the stablecoin is being valued in the market at 100 times, that the underlying layer one, which is really what's securing those transactions, probably is undervalued.
Okay, that assumes though that Ethereum, as you said, is becoming Wall Street's default layer one, but this base layer space that's becoming crowded, right? You've got Solana, Avalanche, you've even got JP Morgan's own infrastructure. So what stops ETH from getting disrupted?
Well, that's, that of course is going to be important for Ethereum to continue to be upgraded and upgrade itself and competitive. But we know Robinhood is using a layer two on Ethereum for its tokenized private equity assets. JP Morgan's stablecoin is going to be operating off in Ethereum ultimately as the layer one. Ethereum is, I think, the preferred blockchain because it has the largest network value of those that you mentioned. And I think also it is the most, I think, compliant in terms of US laws. That's going to be important. But one thing that people need to keep in the back of their minds is the reason someone's going to end up using Ethereum is that you need to make sure that layer one is secure, right? If someone has 100 billion of circulating supply of a stable coin and the layer one isn't compliant and it isn't secure, then it really undermines the security of that stable coin itself. So I think that's why Wall Street banks, as they're converging onto crypto, they're going to end up staking Ethereum itself.
MicroStrategy now holds over 600,000 Bitcoin and amounts so massive it's being called a sovereign put. That kind of leverage gives a stock a built-in premium, and based on recent performance, it's working. Over just the past 6 months, MicroStrategy has returned twice as much as Bitcoin itself. Ethereum treasury plays could soon follow the same trajectory, with stablecoin demand surging and institutions like JP Morgan and Robinhood building directly on Ethereum. The network is rapidly becoming Wall Street's preferred base layer. Now, let's return to Tom Lee as he continues breaking down why the next wave of institutional allocation could be even bigger than the last.
Today, BTC is outperforming, MSTR and ETH is outperforming Bitcoin. Why are the treasuries underperforming the underlying asset if they have a higher beta? Great question there.
Well, there is going to be day-to-day volatility, so it's really difficult for someone to necessarily take a lot of conclusions from one day to the next. But keep in mind, when MicroStrategy began its Bitcoin strategy, Bitcoin was around 16,000. And now MicroStrategy has had a 25 times total return. Part of it is because of the rise in Bitcoin, and part of it, of course, is their ability to be a treasury company. So I think when someone looks at Ethereum today, which is still below its all-time highs, and I think potentially, as Mark Newton points out, could be 5 to 10,000, which is a 4x from here, it should make sense that the Ethereum treasury stocks should do better than a 4x, because that is just the rise in the asset value of their underlying holdings. But of course, then there would be the ability of these treasury companies to acquire more Ethereum in that process. So I do think as time passes, it makes sense that the treasury stock should outperform Ethereum. Year to date, MicroStrategy is up 45% and Bitcoin is up 21%. So even just if I look at the last 6 months, a holder of MicroStrategy earned twice the return by owning MicroStrategy over Bitcoin.
In other news, MicroStrategy just added another 4,225 Bitcoin, bringing its total holdings to 61,550 as Bitcoin surged past $120,000 to hit a new all-time high. MicroStrategy stock jumped 3.5% before settling to a 1.9% gain at $442.76. According to its latest SEC filing, the company spent $470.5 million between July 7th and 13th on this latest purchase. With over 600,000 Bitcoin now on its balance sheet, MicroStrategy remains the largest corporate holder of BTC, essentially turning itself into a leveraged play on the entire asset class. Year to date, the stock is up 47.6% and is now trading just below its 52-week high. To put it in perspective, a $1,000 investment in MicroStrategy 5 years ago would be worth nearly $38,000 today. The conviction is undeniable, but the big question remains, Does the stock already price in its Bitcoin exposure? Or is there still room for even more upside? Thanks for watching. I hope today's video brought you real value. I'll catch you in the next one. And as always, all the best.